But every once in a while, like that's one way that you can add stress. The other way that I've seen that was more effective than that, like that was a little off-putting. But we did a training exercise in Vegas, and we rolled up. There's a bunch of people moulaged up and whatever, but it was actual amputees. The people that set up the training event contracted out people that were actually missing limbs.
Yeah.
So I distinctly remember I was further. Was I a troop chief at this point? I think I was a troop chief. So I was the overall team leader for the scenario. But it was hilarious because my medic literally looks, and the actor, the person in the the role player, didn't have a leg, and he is acting. He's like, "Oh, I got my legs gone." Blah blah. The medic looks at me and goes, "Aaron, this guy really doesn't have a leg." And I was like, "Okay, treat him." They just kind of looked at him, but it was hilarious because it was one of those things where you're like, holy crap, that was crazy. That was another really, really good training event. But there's always ways to add stress, whether it's stress of maybe the role player acting silly, wearing matching Victoria's Secret underwear, or maybe it's actually treating an amputee. But those are all things that we do, to keep it fresh. Because something you said way in the beginning of the podcast that I don't think people realize. People are like, "Oh, what do you do?" I know you train when you're gone, but what do you do when you're deployed? Oh, you still train.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had a 6 days, because usually I let the guys have Sunday off, but 6 days worth of battle rhythm. Tactical Tuesdays, we would do tactics and go to the range and go shoot on Tuesdays. And in between missions, you're still training and you're still doing stuff. You still have upgrades. You still have all these things that you need to do. You're literally training 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it doesn't matter if you're deployed. Your gym time is built into the day, your training time, you're teaching classes, you're going to the range, you're doing medical stuff. Every day for us would start off with, just hip pocket sort of drills. Let's see how fast you can open this litter up. What's our standard for how fast can you tie a simple rope system if we needed to get from A to B, and you're just going to tie a rope bridge, if we're walking in an area and you need to tie into it. So
yeah,
it never stops. You're always training.
No, and that's kind of one of the reasons, and bear with me as I kind of make this analogy, but why do we need to practice blowouts all the time? Why do we need to practice doing Israeli litters? Why do we need, and on and on and on. It doesn't stop with those tasks. And it kind of goes to the point where, and I'm sure you've done this because I know I have. You ever driven somewhere, like you've driven to work somewhere, so you always go and you don't remember the drive. It just freaking happened. It's not that you weren't paying attention to the road. Yeah. You're just like,
dude, bro, did I stop at that red light? Like, you do not remember the entire drive. Yeah.
And I don't know what that's called, whatever kind of level of situational awareness that is. But you're still going through the motions, proper safety and that kind of stuff. But you've just done it so many times that you're not going to get it wrong. And that's why we practice the blowouts. That's why we practice, setting up Israeli litter, because, and I'm using the Israeli litter because it is a relatively simple task, yet people can mess it up. Especially controllers. It's like we mess it up. But, it's fairly simple. And I'm saying that, whereas if you put an Israeli litter in front of me right now, I would jack it up. So I'm not coming in from my high horse here saying like, oh yeah, I got it right. I'd mess it up right now.
Yeah.
But we practice those things so that you can do it and you don't have to think about it. Mm-hmm. So it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about opening up your bandwidth. I can do the Israeli litter, or I can do that. I can give an IV like nothing. I don't even think about it. Mm-hmm. I can administer or draw medication. Don't even think about it. I can get a gun to target line and do a time to target or a time on target, with all the calculations without even thinking about it very much. Like that's why we train to that point, so that I can then, lessen that stress or lessen that, mental stuff that I've got to do to figure that out. And then I can get to other things that are more important or more pressing.
Right. There is nothing funnier than watching somebody struggle to get a patient on a Skedco. Like that is my favorite thing of all time. You have the Skedco that's out there. I love, our TAC-P, TAC-P, SR controller brothers. Nothing gives me more joy than legitimately throwing a bag at somebody and be like, hey, put the guy on that Skedco, and then just having them like start looking at the Skedco, because they come rolled up, right? Like, so what we're talking about, it's a full, it's hoistable, it's really, you can put it in tight spaces. It basically like tacos the patient. So, if you've seen them, they're the green Skedco, the green litter that you can drag.
Yeah,
like
and it's a
seen
hardened plastic kind of thing. But
it
you
is,
can do anything with that. Hoist it, drag it.
You can do it vertically. You can bring somebody up a, you can attach it to a rope system. There's a way that we can tie into it that you can bring somebody up a mountain. You can hoist it to a helicopter. You've seen it. It's out there, but it comes rolled up in a bag, right? So it's, this big, the Skedcos are, and, it's rolled up in about that big. But because it's rolled up and it's hard plastic, it's constantly rolled up, so it's always trying to like roll itself back up. So watching somebody struggle trying to put like a limp noodle of a patient on a Skedco, it just makes my heart happy. Because unless you know how to do it, like there's a way that you can stand on it and then drag the patient. You essentially use the patient to roll the Skedco out, and you can roll it out with your feet and whatever. Once you figure out the way to do it, it's pretty simple. But watching somebody struggle with that bad boy, magnifique. Oh, I love it so much. But unless you practice those things, you're not going to know. Unless you put hands on it, like unless you're, on medical Mondays, when we talk about how we put patients on litters and how we mark our litters, like there's a way to mark the litter, because you can mess the Skedco up. If you put the patient's head at the patient's foot, or if you have it flipped, like guys will do that as well. They'll unroll it, they'll put it on the ground, they'll put the patient on the wrong side. It won't work like that. It's not interchangeable in that way. Like there is a right way to put a patient on the Skedco, but unless you open it up in daylight at the beginning of your alert day, unless you have somebody that's walking you through it, you're not going to be able to do it during that time.